Hey guys, tonight we are not going to talk about any great battles or magnificent queens or world-changing revolutions. No, tonight we're easing ourselves into a much quieter, more personal crisis insomnia. Specifically, the sleeplessness that haunted the gas-lit streets and velvet drawing rooms of the Victorian era, and the absolutely wild things people did to try and catch a few hours of rest. You can almost smell the coal smoke and damp wool of a London street right now, can't you? You picture yourself, maybe a successful merchant or a factory foreman, or perhaps a governess to a large, demanding family, lying stiffly in a massive four-poster bed. The silence of the night, usually a comfort, has become a vast, suffocating space, filled only with the relentless tick-tock of the grandfather clock downstairs and the frantic, looping worries in your own head. The machine of the 19th century. All that progress, all that industry, all that moral earnestness, has cranked you up so tight you simply cannot unwind. Every thought is a tiny, persistent gnat buzzing around the flickering gaslight of your mind. You trudge downstairs in your thick, flannel nightgown, your feet cold on the polished wood. You're desperate. Because in this time, sleeplessness wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a genuine, terrifying sign of moral and physical decay. If you couldn't sleep, it meant you were too stressed, too modern, perhaps even too weak for the great engine of Victorian progress. It was an epidemic. The Industrial Revolution had sped up life dramatically, creating new wealth, new noise, new anxiety, and consequently, new diseases of the nervous system. The stress of the modern office job, the relentless pressure of social climbing, the sheer volume of information being published in newspapers and journals for the first time. It all added up to a restless nation. The pace of life accelerated so rapidly that the human body and mind simply hadn't evolved fast enough to cope with the sheer volume of stimuli. You feel a profound, aching sense of failure every morning when you drag yourself out of bed, your eyes gritty and red, knowing you're about to face another day fueled by sheer willpower and maybe a strong cup of tea. It's a world away from the agrarian past, where life's rhythms were dictated by the sun, not the whistle of the 5 a.m. factory siren. The very concept of 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, 8 hours recreation was a radical recent idea, and most people weren't achieving the rest part. Historians still argue whether this widespread insomnia was purely a psychological response to industrialization, or if the poor air quality and constant background noise of the cities played an equally large role in disturbing the quality of sleep. So, you're sitting there in your parlor, watching the fire die down to a dull red glow, and you start to think about the remedies. You think about the bizarre, the chemical, the gentle, and the frankly dangerous things your neighbors, your doctor, and those ubiquitous patent medicine peddlers are recommending. And let me assure you, you probably won't survive some of the solutions we are about to explore tonight. But don't worry, we're just talking about them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you are in the world right now, and what the local time is in the comments below, and let's all share this moment of quiet historical wandering together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You know, the first solution you might have reached for. The cheapest and most accessible wasn't a doctor's prescription, but a simple trip to the local apothecary or even the grocer. You've heard the whispers, the recommendations, the hushed sharing of successful experiences among your friends. This isn't just about a strong tea. This is about something far more potent, something that seeped into the very fabric of Victorian life. It was a cure that offered oblivion in a small, dark bottle. The next step on your restless journey takes you straight into the gentle but insidious world of laudanum. And that is where we turn the page. The small, dark bottle sitting on your mantelpiece, easily purchased from the chemist's shop without any awkward questions, contains laudanum. This isn't some rare, exotic pharmaceutical. This is the household sleep aid, the general purpose pain reliever, the universal Victorian solvent for bad nerves, menstrual cramps, teething babies, and yes, your relentless insomnia. You uncork the vial, and the air is immediately thick with the sweet, alcoholic scent of poppy extract. You measure out the prescribed amount, a few drops, perhaps a teaspoon, depending on your tolerance and the specific bottle's potency, into a glass of water, or perhaps a glass of sherry if you're feeling particularly decadent and you want to double down on the sedation. Laudanum, you must understand, is simply tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol. It was everywhere. It was cheaper than gin, easier to acquire than many basic foodstuffs, and perfectly legal. It wasn't just consumed by the aristocracy in their velvet drawing rooms. It was the poor man's comfort, the factory worker's quick fix to numb the aching exhaustion of a 16-hour shift. The sheer ubiquity is almost unthinkable now. You could find it in every medicine cabinet, every nursery, and every traveling salesman's sample kit. You might even find it being administered in your local tea shop, a few drops stirred into your morning brew to help you cope with the day ahead. The effects are subtle at first. You feel a gentle warmth spreading through your chest, a dulling of the sharp edges of your anxiety. The frantic thoughts that were previously racing through your mind, the debt you owe, the argument with your spouse, the perpetual fear of failure, begin to slow, their urgency muted. It's like turning the volume down on the world. You trudge back up to your bed, and this time, the heavy woolen blankets and the horsehair mattress feel less like a prison and more like a gentle, enveloping cloud. You drift off, not into deep, restorative sleep, but into a heavy, dreamless state of oblivion. This substance, which we now view with absolute horror, was not considered a vice by most Victorians in the way that heavy drinking might be. It was considered a friendly narcotic, a medicine, a necessary lubricant for the grinding machine of modern life. Physicians prescribed it freely, believing it balanced the nervous system, which was constantly being stressed and depleted by the high-pressure environment of the age. Historians still argue whether the widespread addiction that developed was viewed as a failure of moral character or simply an unfortunate side effect of an overprescribed and underregulated medicine. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. One of the most famous laudanum users was the writer Thomas de Quincey, who penned Confessions of an English Opium Eater. His vivid, often nightmarish descriptions of his drug-induced dreams and the struggle to quit actually served to sensationalize opium use and make it, in a bizarre way, somewhat fashionable among the bohemian set. You could be seen as a sensitive, artistic soul, suffering for your genius, if you were a regular consumer. The mainstream historical fact here is that the consumption of opium products per capita in Britain peaked around 1830 and remained extraordinarily high through the mid-century, largely driven by easy access to laudanum and other patent remedies. No prescription was needed. You simply walked in, handed over a penny or two, and walked out with enough to quiet your mind for several nights. But of course, the temporary peace comes at a heavy price. You wake with a dry mouth and a fuzzy, sluggish feeling that takes hours to shake off. You might find yourself needing a little bit more each night to achieve the same effect. You know that voice in your head, the one that tells you, just one more drop to be sure. That little voice starts getting louder, more insistent. And as the market economy realized the immense profit potential in your sleepless misery, you started seeing competitors to laudanum emerging, less pure, perhaps, but far more aggressively marketed. You are about to become the target of the great Victorian marketing machine, selling you sleep in ever more colorful, yet equally dangerous, concoctions. This restless journey now takes us to the truly chaotic world of patent medicines and the sleep elixir's promising miracles. Now that you've had your initial, slightly fuzzy introduction to the gentle oblivion of laudanum, your sleepless anxieties continue, and so does the market's response. You see advertisements everywhere in the penny dreadfuls, plastered on hoardings, and slipped into your morning paper. This is the dawn of modern mass marketing, and your desperate need for sleep is the perfect target. You walk past the pharmacy window, and a bottle catches your eye. Dr. Goodfellow's Great Restorative Elixir, or perhaps Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup. These are the patent medicines, a chaotic, colorful world of unregulated, aggressively marketed concoctions promising perfect, blissful sleep. These elixirs, often sold under reassuringly medical or folksy names, promise to calm the nervous system, restore vitality, or banish that dreadful nighttime worry. The bottles were often elaborately designed with impressive, official-looking labels, creating the illusion of scientific authority. But what was actually in that dark, sugary liquid you were pouring down your throat? The manufacturers weren't required to list the ingredients. You were taking a leap of faith, hoping that the flowery promises matched the results. And often, they did, but for the most dangerous of reasons. A vast number of these patent sleep remedies contained the same active ingredient as laudanum, opium, or increasingly, other potent narcotics like morphine are derivative of opium, or even cannabis. They simply mask the taste with strong flavors like licorice, sugar, or copious amounts of alcohol. You'd be told it was a vegetable compound or a natural herbal extract, giving you the pleasing psychological comfort that you weren't relying on something harsh or chemical. You feel that gentle, familiar warmth spread through you, followed by the dulling sedation, and you praise the natural ingredients for their effectiveness, never realizing you've simply paid a higher price for a more elaborately packaged dose of your old friend, the poppy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup, a remedy targeted specifically at mothers to calm their irritable, teething babies, a truly heartbreaking side use of these drugs, was found to contain large quantities of morphine. Imagine giving your restless child a tiny dose of powerful opiate, simply to ensure a quiet night. It speaks volumes about the level of desperation and the profound, trusting ignorance fostered by the lack of regulation. The mainstream historical fact about patent medicines is that their rise contributed to an enormous growth in self-medication and a skepticism towards legitimate medical doctors, who were often expensive and whose treatments seemed less immediately effective than the powerful sedatives in these easily accessible bottles. If you're a working-class person, why pay a doctor for leeches and dietary advice when a single shilling buys a week's worth of guaranteed oblivion? But the secrecy around the ingredients led to two major problems for you, the sleepless Victorian. First, you never knew the dosage. A common brand might suddenly change its formula, leading to accidental overdoses. Second, the hidden narcotics led to widespread, unrecognized addiction. You weren't an opium eater. Like the Bohemians, you were simply a respectable gentleman taking his nightly dose of Degas, Jones's nerve tonic. Historians still argue whether the patent medicine craze exacerbated the social anxieties of the era by creating a hidden population of addicts, or if it simply provided a necessary, temporary psychological release valve for people under relentless economic pressure. As you finish your dose of the latest, miraculous night draught, the sugar coating wears thin. You start to realize that while these remedies put you to sleep, they don't actually heal your sleeplessness. They merely postpone it. Your doctor, noticing your persistent lethargy and the slight tremor in your hands, begins to worry. He believes your problem isn't just a matter of nerves, but a matter of your entire lifestyle being unbalanced. The medical community, eager to reclaim authority from the quacks and the marketers, begins to push a very different, far more rigorous approach, one that involves less bottled oblivion and more iron will. You are about to enter the era where your bedroom becomes a battleground for your health, and your physician takes control of your sleep. Having exhausted the sugary, poppy-infused promises of the patent medicines, you now turn to the emerging class of professional medical men. Your family doctor, a serious gentleman in a starched collar who smells faintly of carbolic acid, insists that your sleeplessness is not merely a failing of your nerves, but a failure of your entire regimen. He is determined to reclaim authority from the quacks. For the Victorian physician, the key to treating insomnia was not simply masking the symptom with drugs, but medicalizing the bedroom and regulating every moment of your daily life. The first thing your doctor attacks is your diet. You might be accustomed to a heavy, late dinner, roast beef, perhaps a generous helping of rich pudding, all washed down with port. This, your doctor pronounces with certainty, is a recipe for nocturnal distress. Your digestive system is simply too burdened to allow your brain the necessary peace. He prescribes a lighter, earlier meal, perhaps a simple bowl of gruel or broth, consumed well before sunset. No stimulating tea or coffee after noon. This is a crucial, mainstream historical fact. The widespread belief that indigestion was the primary physical cause of insomnia drove massive changes in late Victorian eating habits, pushing dinner times earlier for the respectable classes. Beyond diet, he imposes a rigid, unforgiving schedule. You must go to bed at the same time, precisely every night, regardless of whether you feel tired or not. You must rise at the same time, often unnaturally early, to avoid the temptation of lying in bed and encouraging nervous debility. If you cannot sleep, You are advised to get up, perhaps read a particularly dry book in another room, and then return to bed only when you feel genuinely drowsy. The idea is to break the association between your bed and the mental anxiety of sleeplessness. You are essentially being trained to view sleep not as a spontaneous gift, but as a military objective requiring strict discipline. Here's a quirky tidbit that reflects this medical obsession with control. Some physicians advocated the use of specially designed sleep harnesses or light wrist restraints to prevent the sleeper from moving too much. The theory was that even minor tossing and turning indicated a restless mind that needed to be physically quieted. Imagine being gently, or perhaps not so gently, tethered to your mattress, a bizarre attempt to enforce stillness in the hopes of summoning repose. This strict medicalization extended to the atmosphere of the bedroom itself. It must be cold, dark, and perfectly ventilated. You're encouraged to sleep with the window slightly ajar, no matter the weather, to let in the pure night air, believing that stale air was almost poisonous to the nervous system. The heavier curtains and thick rugs you loved were deemed unhealthy dust traps that stifled the flow of vital air. As you struggle to follow this exhausting regimen, early dinner, rigid bedtime, cold room, you might find yourself feeling even more anxious. The failure to sleep now compounded by the failure to adhere to doctor's orders. Historians still argue whether this prescriptive medical approach helped genuine cases of insomnia or simply replaced chemical dependence with a new form of behavioral anxiety, making the fear of sleeplessness itself the primary problem. Your physician, seeing your continuing distress despite the gruel and the open window, decides he needs a stronger, more direct intervention to soothe your agitated nerves. He moves beyond simple behavioral adjustments and delves into the era's fascination with elemental forces. He's decided that your problem is that you are quite simply running too hot and need to be cooled down. He introduces you to the shocking world of hydrotherapy, and your restful journey is about to get very, very wet. You've tried the mild narcotics, the strict diet, and the regimented schedule. Yet, here you are, still staring at the ceiling, still anxiously counting the slow seconds until dawn. Your physician, having decided that your fiery nervousness needs a radical, elemental counterbalance, introduces you to the concept of hydrotherapy. This wasn't just a casual bath. This was a serious, almost militaristic application of water designed to shock your system out of its insomniac rut. The belief was that the nervous system, overstimulated by modern life, was in a state of chronic, unhealthy tension. The application of cold water was supposed to act as a vigorous, immediate tonic, drawing the blood away from the congested brain and redirecting it to the skin and peripheral tissues, effectively resetting the whole mechanism. The experience itself, however, is far from relaxing. You are instructed to take a variety of water treatments, and one of the most popular, and indeed most jarring, is the cold sheet pack. You strip down, and a nurse or attendant swiftly wraps you in sheets that have been wrung out in icy cold water. You are cocooned, almost mummified in a chilling, damp embrace. Then they cover you with heavy blankets and perhaps a layer of waterproof material. Initially, you shiver violently, your teeth chattering, your entire body protesting the sudden, shocking chill. It's an intensely uncomfortable period of about 10 to 20 minutes, where you honestly wonder if your doctor is trying to cure you or simply freeze you into submission. The idea is that this initial shock phase is followed by a reactionary phase. Your body, fighting for its warmth, begins to heat the damp sheets, and the cool water slowly turns into a comforting, steamy vapor. You begin to sweat gently inside your cocoon, and the weight of the blankets, combined with the mild, induced fever, is supposed to be deeply relaxing and detoxifying. It's a bizarre, paradoxical path to sleep, shocking your system with cold to induce warmth and calm. The mainstream historical fact is that hydrotherapy, popularized by figures like Vincent Priesnitz and later adapted in Victorian spas, became a staple remedy for everything from dyspepsia to hysteria, with insomnia being one of its star targets. Then there are the simpler, though still dramatic, applications. You might be told to take a bracing cold sitz bath just before bed, where you plunge your lower half into water that is near freezing. The theory is that this rapid cooling of the lower body would pull blood away from the head, clearing the mind for sleep. Or perhaps you're advised to have water applied to your head via a dripping sheet, or even a steady, cold trickle from a hose. A chilling ritual designed to cool the supposed fever of the brain. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some of the more extreme hydrotherapists would administer the Dutch, which involved a high-pressure jet of cold water directed at a specific part of the body, sometimes even the spine. You might imagine that being blasted with cold water before bed is the absolute last thing that would help you relax. But in the Victorian mind, aggressive treatment signaled potent effectiveness. As you lie there in your damp sheets, shivering slightly, you realize the immense lengths people will go to in order to escape the prison of their own minds. You're trading the chemical oblivion of opium for the sensory assault of icy water. Historians still argue whether the perceived success of hydrotherapy was due to genuine physiological changes, the relaxation of blood vessels and reduced heart rate, or purely the intense placebo effect of undergoing such a rigorous, disciplined, and often expensive treatment. But eventually, the water treatments, too, lose their novelty, or perhaps they simply prove too inconvenient and harsh for daily use. You seek a modern, less messy solution. The late Victorian era, with its increasing love affair with technology, presents the ultimate modern cure for sleeplessness, a harnessing of the invisible forces that now power the cities. You are about to trade water for wires, as your quest for rest leads you into the buzzing, tingling world of electrotherapy. You have shivered through the icy rigors of hydrotherapy, and still the sleep eludes you, mocking your efforts. Now, as the 19th century draws toward its close, the air is thick with the promise of electricity. This powerful, invisible force, which lights your streets and runs the new urban machinery, is seen not just as a tool of progress, but as a healing agent, a way to mend the broken circuitry of your nervous system. Your doctor, embracing modernity, now suggests electrotherapy as the ultimate, cutting-edge cure for your persistent insomnia. The theory behind using electricity was beguilingly simple. Your nerves were frayed, your system was unbalanced, and a mild, therapeutic jolt could literally recharge and recalibrate your body for sleep. You are instructed to visit a practitioner, or perhaps, if you are wealthy enough, you purchase a compact home battery and a set of electrodes. The scene is oddly scientific. full of buzzing coils and polished brass. You sit down, perhaps in a large, wooden armchair that looks suspiciously like a torture device, and the attendant attaches the electrodes. These might be placed directly on your head, along your spine, or even held in your hands, sometimes just a simple metal rod or a damp sponge. The current is mild, often described as a gentle, tingling sensation or a low, persistent buzz. This is not the powerful, dangerous electricity we think of today. It's a faradic or galvanic current, carefully controlled. The whole process, which might last for 20 minutes, is supposed to gently fatigue your excited nerves, lulling them into a state of post-shock relaxation. Here's a quirky tidbit. One popular device was the vibrating chair or oscillating couch. While not strictly electrical, it worked on a similar principle of overwhelming the senses to force relaxation. You would sit or lie down while the device vibrated rapidly. The sheer, relentless humming and shaking intended to replace your mental anxieties with a physical sensation so intense it demanded all your focus, after which you would supposedly collapse into a serene sleep. Imagine trying to relax while strapped into a gentle earthquake machine. The mainstream historical fact is that the rise of electrotherapy was intrinsically linked to the increasing understanding of the nervous system. Doctors, having observed how electricity could stimulate muscles and nerves, hypothesized that a mild current could also soothe and restore them. It was a purely physical approach, ignoring the psychological causes of stress and focusing only on the physiological output. And yet, for some, it actually seemed to work. The feeling of the gentle buzz, the anticipation, the sheer novelty of the high-tech treatment, all of it combined to create a powerful placebo effect. The tingling sensation became associated with the promise of rest. You would trudge home after a session feeling slightly light-headed, perhaps a little tired from the enforced stillness, and you might actually enjoy a night of deeper slumber. However, the efficacy was highly debatable, and like all fads, the enthusiasm for household electricity as a cure began to wane as the more realistic medical community pushed back against the rampant commercialism. Historians still argue whether the perceived success of these electrical treatments was simply a temporary psychological distraction from the underlying anxiety, or if the mild currents did, in fact, have a genuine, if minor, physical effect on muscle relaxation and blood flow. As the buzz of the electrical machine fades and the novelty wears off, your physician realizes that the nervous system, once excited, needs something more reliable than quack devices or cold water to truly quiet down. The scientific world, moving away from herbal tinctures and electrical gimmicks, had been quietly at work, synthesizing the first truly modern drugs. Your quest for sleep is about to take a sharp turn from the purely physical and mechanical toward the cold, hard logic of chemistry, the arrival of synthesized sedatives. You have now journeyed through the realms of poppy, cold water, and electric shock, but your body, exhausted yet still strangely wired, demands something reliable, something that works every single time. As the 1870s and 1880s press, the scientific revolution that gave rise to electricity also gives birth to the quiet chemical shift. The introduction of the first truly synthesized sedatives. This is where the quest for sleep leaves the world of herbal remedies and enters the cold, hard precision of the chemical laboratory. The new class of sedatives was marketed as modern, safe, and non-addictive alternatives to the capricious dangers of opium and its derivatives. They were the proud result of organic chemistry, designed to directly target the nervous system without the complex, unpredictable side effects of plant extracts. The shift marks a critical moment. The medical world finally had specific, manufactured agents for calming the nerves. One of the earliest and most successful was potassium bromide. You would take it as a simple salt dissolved in water. It was a depressant that slowed down nervous activity, and doctors prescribed it relentlessly for everything related to nervousness, including epilepsy, hysteria, and, of course, your stubborn insomnia. The key selling point was that it wasn't an opiate. It was seen as a clean, purely chemical way to sedate the nervous system. The mainstream historical fact is that bromides dominated the market for nervous disorders for decades, becoming a staple in many a respectable Victorian medicine cabinet, often prescribed in incredibly high doses. Another compound that emerged around this time, and one that had a far more dramatic effect, was chloral hydrate. It was synthesized in 1832, but its potent sedative properties weren't fully recognized until the late 1860s. This drug was remarkable for its fast action and the depth of sleep it induced. You would take it, often as a sickly, sweet syrup, and you would fall into an immediate, heavy slumber. Unlike opium, which could still leave you restless, chloral hydrate was the hammer of sedatives, guaranteeing oblivion. Here's where the quirky tidbit comes in. Chloral hydrate became infamous in popular culture as the drug used to create Mickey Fins, a dangerous knockout drop. Its reputation oscillated wildly, seen simultaneously as a scientific miracle for the sleepless and a terrifying poison in the hands of the unscrupulous. However, the promises of safety were often exaggerated. Chloral hydrate was powerful, but it was also highly toxic in overdose, and the therapeutic dose was often dangerously close to the lethal one. Furthermore, while not an opiate, it proved to be profoundly habit-forming. You would quickly develop a dependence, needing more and more of the harsh chemical to achieve that deep, necessary quiet. You are now caught between the gentle, addictive embrace of laudanum and the harsh, toxic dependence of the new chemicals. Your doctor, in his drive for scientific precision, is trying to find the perfect chemical key to unlock your sleep. But the side effects, the bromide acne, the chronic depression from chloral hydrate, are adding new anxieties to your existing sleeplessness. Historians still argue whether the move from plant-based narcotics to synthesized presented a true medical advance or merely a substitution of one form of widespread addiction for another, equally dangerous one, under the guise of scientific progress. You yearn for a simpler fix, one that doesn't involve chemicals or cold plunges. As your medical journey gets increasingly complex, you begin to look back at your own environment. Surely, the very structure of your life, the house you live in, the bed you sleep in, must be a factor. The market, always ready to monetize your misery, agrees, leading us to a new focus: the architectural sleep secrets of the Victorian bedroom. After the chemical sedation and the jarring electric shocks, you turn your attention closer to home. You realize your sleeplessness might not be entirely an internal failure, but an external one. The marketplace, sensing this shift from internal medication to external environment, begins to push the idea that the architecture of your bedroom and the very materials of your bed are secret weapons in the war against insomnia. The bedroom itself becomes a carefully calibrated machine designed for rest. The primary focus is on ventilation and temperature, building upon the doctor's insistence on pure night air. Engineers and architects start promoting sophisticated ventilation systems. You are told that the carbon dioxide you exhale is poisonous, creating a dense, sleep-killing layer of stale air near the floor. Thus, bedroom windows must be large, and in grander homes, specialized air shafts are designed to constantly pull fresh, cool air into the room, sweeping out the noxious gases. You lie in bed, perhaps shivering slightly under your eiderdown, convinced that the rush of cold air is scientifically optimizing your chances of repose. This is the mainstream historical fact. The widespread Victorian fear of miasma and stale air drove massive changes in domestic architecture, particularly regarding bedrooms. Then there is the bed itself. You may look at your heavy, stuffed mattress, perhaps filled with straw, horsehair, or even wool, and realize it retains too much heat and, worse, harbors dust and insects. The new solution is the spring mattress. Advertisements show cutaways of intricate coiled springs, promising individualized support and, crucially, superior air circulation. These mattresses were lighter, cleaner, and marketed as the hygienic, scientific path to rest. You spend a substantial sum on one of these modern marvels, hoping the lack of heat and the buoyant support will finally break the cycle of tossing and turning. Here's a quirky tidbit. The ideal height of a bed became a point of debate. Some sleep experts argued that very low beds were best, putting the sleeper closer to the Earth's natural magnetic field for grounding and calm. Others insisted on very high beds, almost small platforms, to raise the sleeper above the dense, cold, unhealthy air near the floor. You might find yourself constantly adjusting your sleeping height, convinced that a few inches either way holds the secret to restful slumber. Beyond the physical structure, the very decor was scrutinized. Dark, heavy wallpapers and thick velvet curtains, once signs of wealth and comfort, were deemed psychologically stimulating and unhealthy dust traps. The new vogue was for simpler, lighter colors, pale blues, soft creams, and clean whites, all intended to create a visual environment of calm purity and emptiness that would naturally induce sleep. You find yourself stripping away the clutter, hoping that a lack of visual stimulation will translate into a lack of mental stimulation. But even with the window open and the new spring mattress installed, the noise of the city, the rumble of the trams, the shouts of the night vendors, still pierces the silence. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with bedroom architecture was a genuine attempt at sanitary reform or simply another way for the affluent to feel superior to the crowded, airless bedrooms of the working poor. The inability to sleep, for many, was simply a reflection of an environment they could not control, no matter how much they spent on a new, hygienic bed, with the architecture failing to provide the final solution, and chemicals still proving too risky. The final frontier for your search is the gentle, non-drug remedy. The focus shifts from what you take to what you do during the day. Your doctor, tired of treating your symptoms, now wants to treat your soul. He begins to prescribe not pills, but activity and hobby, hoping that a quiet, repetitive physical action will finally exhaust your overactive mind. You have now reached a point in your sleepless journey where the pendulum swings back toward simplicity. The drugs are too harsh, the electricity too quirky, and the cold water too unpleasant. Your medical advisors, having failed to chemically or mechanically force you into sleep, now preach a new gospel, the gentle exercise prescription. The idea is elegantly straightforward. Your brain is tired, but your body isn't. You are suffering from cerebral congestion, and the only way to alleviate it is to gently drain the blood and energy away from your hyperactive mind by engaging your muscles. The recommended activities are crucial. They must be non-competitive, repetitive, and performed outdoors if possible. The most common prescription you receive is a long, steady walk in the fresh air, particularly in the late afternoon. This isn't a brisk constitutional or a power walk. This is a deliberate, slow, almost meditative trudge designed to induce a state of mild physical exhaustion without the mental strain of vigorous sport. You are told to focus on the rhythmic placement of your feet, the gentle swing of your arms, allowing the mild physical labor to displace the mental agitation. The mainstream historical fact here is the rise in popularity of walking and gardening among the educated classes, specifically as non-stimulating therapeutic activities for the nerves. Beyond walking, you are encouraged to take up repetitive hobbies, activities that engage the hands and require just enough concentration to quiet the mind's louder worries. For women, this often meant knitting, crocheting, or embroidery. Hours spent producing patterned fabric, the rhythmic movement of the needles acting as a quiet physical mantra. For men, it might be wood carving, amateur joinery, or repetitive filing in a home workshop. The key is the quiet, measurable progress and the predictable motion. Historians still argue whether this prescription was truly therapeutic or simply reinforced the era's gender roles, directing women towards calming, domestic crafts and men towards productive, manual labor. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorian sleep manuals went so far as to suggest counting objects, not sheep, but perhaps the bricks in a wall, or the wrinkles in a tablecloth, as a way to occupy the mind with a task so dull and repetitive that it would naturally surrender to boredom. You might find yourself sitting stiffly in your parlor, attempting to count the tiny flower petals in the wallpaper pattern, your eyes crossing slightly, hoping this voluntary dullness will be your saving grace. The beauty of this approach is its lack of side effects and its emphasis on control. You feel you are actively earning your sleep through healthy labor, rather than cheating your way there with drugs. The mild fatigue you accumulate from your long walk or your hours of monotonous knitting seems to be the one thing that cuts through the mental chatter. You feel a natural, healthy pull toward your bed, rather than a chemical push. As you conclude your final attempt at a lifestyle-based cure, you realize that the quest for sleep has been a microcosm of the entire Victorian era, a struggle between old traditions and new science, between moral discipline and chemical indulgence, between simple physical labor and intense nervous exhaustion. Every cure, from the drop of laudanum to the slow turn of the knitting needle, has been an attempt to bridge the gap between the frantic speed of modern life and the ancient, primal need for rest. Your journey nears its end, and we must now look at the legacy and slow fade of these fascinating, often perilous cures and how they shape the way we think about sleep today. You lie in your clean, well-ventilated bed, perhaps feeling the slight, pleasant ache in your legs from your late afternoon constitutional, a hint of calm from the repetitive motions of your evening handiwork. You reflect on the sheer variety of remedies you've encountered. A bizarre historical gauntlet stretching from the dark syrupy oblivion of Laudanum to the gentle, rhythmic click of your knitting needles. This final leg of our journey examines the legacy and slow fade of these Victorian cures, and how their triumphs and failures irrevocably shaped our modern approach to sleep. As the Victorian age gave way to the Edwardian and beyond, the most dangerous of these cures began their slow, necessary fade. The easy, unregulated access to opium and morphine was the first to fall under scrutiny. The devastating human cost of widespread addiction, once swept under the rug as a personal failing, became too obvious to ignore. The mainstream historical fact is the gradual introduction of pharmaceutical controls, such as the Pharmacy Act of 1868 in Britain and the Harrison Narcotics Act of 1914 in the United States, which severely restricted the sale of opiates, marking the end of the chemist's shop as a casual dealer of oblivion. This forced a massive, though painful, withdrawal from the chemical comfort that had lubricated Victorian life for decades. The more outlandish cures faded too, not through legislation, but through ridicule and evolving science. The spectacle of being shocked in a vibrating chair or wrapped in icy sheets became the stuff of music hall jokes. While hydrotherapy retains a place in some spa treatments today, its grand, sweeping claims as a cure for all nervous diseases were quietly retired. Even the highly prescribed bromides began to lose favor as physicians realized their cumulative toxicity, which led to chronic health issues and a persistent, dulling effect on the mind. The pursuit of the perfect, non-addictive, synthesized sedative continued, leading eventually to barbiturates and later benzodiazepines. But the lessons of the Victorian era, that chemical dependence is an insidious enemy, was slowly, painfully integrated. Here's a quirky tidbit: the very idea of sleeping pills, a discreet, nightly capsule to solve insomnia, is a direct, though refined, descendant of those Victorian patent medicines. They fulfilled the same psychological need for a quick, simple technological fix to a complex emotional problem. Today's sleep aids are far safer and more targeted, but they still represent the Victorian dream of conquering the night with chemistry. But the Victorian era left a profound, positive legacy as well. The enduring success of the non-drug cures, the emphasis on diet, exercise, a consistent schedule, and a cool, dark room formed the foundation of modern sleep hygiene. The prescriptive Victorian doctor, who insisted you get out of bed rather than simply lie there anxious, pioneered the behavioral therapies we still use today. Historians still argue whether the most valuable contribution of Victorian medicine was its scientific advancements or its accidental discovery that the most potent cure for an overstimulated mind is often the simplest: quiet routine and gentle physical exhaustion. So you are left with this rich, contradictory heritage. You can close your eyes tonight knowing that the sleeplessness you might experience connects you across time to every anxious merchant, every overworked governess, and every frantic doctor who tried to conquer the relentless tyranny of the night with a spoonful of syrup, a coil of wire, or a simple, steadying breath. Now, let your shoulders relax and feel the tension start to drain slowly from your neck. You've listened to a great deal tonight, absorbing the fascinating, sometimes dangerous, history of how people fought the darkness of sleeplessness. Your mind has traveled from the gas-lit apothecaries selling their potent, sugary tinctures to the buzzing, electric laboratories, and finally to the quiet, rhythmic act of a late evening walk. All that effort, all that searching, all those remedies were just leading to this moment right now. Feel the weight of your head sinking into the pillow. There is nothing left to solve tonight. No elixirs to measure, no doctors to please, no schedules to keep. The history has stopped. The quest is over. All the anxieties of the day, all the persistent worries are simply tired echoes now, fading into the comfortable, growing quiet of the room. You have done enough. You can let go. Just listen to the soft, distant hum of the world outside, and allow your body, finally, to be still. Let the gentle weight of the blankets press you down into the calm, velvet darkness. Everything can wait until morning.